Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to talk about a feeling that so many of us know but really struggle to name: emptiness. We're going to explore a journey from seeing it as some kind of personal flaw to understanding it as a pretty meaningful process. The whole thing kicks off with this incredibly honest admission. The author talks about it being this persistent kind of low-level background noise, that private feeling that something essential is just missing. Believing you're fundamentally wrong, that really sets the stage for everything that follows. So, the very first step in this journey was to stop running and actually figure out what this specific feeling was. It wasn't just sadness or grief, it was something way more slippery, like emotional static that's just really hard to tune into. And the word the author finally lands on is emptiness. It's defined not as some active pain, but as an absence, this emotional flatness that's just so hard to describe. And because it couldn't be named, it got twisted into this personal defect, something you had to hide or fix. So to deal with this feeling, a three-part strategy of avoidance clicked into place, right? You stayed busy to fill the silence. You stay distracted to change the subject. And you stay analytical, thinking about your feelings instead of actually feeling them. The goal was just do anything but sit with that emotional void. But here's the thing, that kind of constant running takes a ton of energy, and eventually you just run out. That forces a really crucial shift from seeing this feeling as something wrong with you to just observing it. And this wasn't some sudden aha moment. It was a turning point that came from pure exhaustion, from constantly fighting what was going on inside. At some point, the cost of avoiding it just became higher than the discomfort of the feeling itself. And this right here, this is the core of the whole thing. The question shifted from this place of self-judgment, what is wrong with me, to a simple, neutral observation. This is the texture of my present. It takes it from being a personal failure to just a fact. So, and this is so important, this new way of looking at it didn't just make the emptiness vanish. Nope, the feeling was still there. But the relationship to the feeling changed. That heavy, exhausting layer of self-criticism, that's what lifted. And that made all the difference. So once that judgment was out of the way, it was actually possible to look a little deeper. What was really hiding underneath that surface of emptiness? What was it trying to tell me? The author realized that over a lifetime, these internal walls had been built up. Things like denial or intellectualizing, where you think, I feel sad, instead of just letting yourself be sad, or minimizing how big a deal something is. They were all built to keep discomfort away. And this led to a really powerful idea. Maybe emptiness isn't a lack of feeling at all. Maybe it's the result of all those unfelt emotions, the ones you kept behind the walls just settling over time like silt at the bottom of a river. And as they started paying more attention, it became really clear this emptiness wasn't just random. It was connected to a very specific, deeply buried thought, one that was probably too hard or maybe too shameful to even admit to yourself. Wow. The precision here is it's really powerful. It's not about wanting things to end. It's this feeling of being suspended, a deep, deep exhaustion with the sheer effort of existing. Now, at first, realizing this thought was there brought on this huge wave of guilt and isolation. It felt like a massive personal failure. But then, something interesting happened. The author discovered this feeling is surprisingly common. It turns out this emotional limbo happens a lot, especially to people who've done everything right. They've met all the expectations, ticked all the boxes, but they still feel completely hollow inside. Just knowing that, it totally transformed the feeling from a private shame into a shared human experience, and that helped loosen its grip. Okay, so if this feeling is common, and it comes from stuffing things down, what do you do with it? Well, that leads us to the final, really transformative part of this journey, seeing emptiness not as a problem to be solved, but as a process. This slide basically sums up the entire journey in one go. The whole interpretation of emptiness changes. It goes from being this final diagnosis, something is wrong with me, to being an active signal, something is trying to be felt. It's not the end of the story, it's a message. And so the goal becomes acceptance. But let's be clear about what that means. It's not about giving up or just surrendering to the feeling. It's about accuracy. Just having the simple, honest willingness to see what's going on inside you for what it is, right now, without needing it to change immediately. So, what is this emptiness trying to signal? Well, it points to a history of repression, maybe a kind of inexperience with actually living in our own emotions. And I think most hopefully, it signals a nervous system that is slowly, carefully, learning how to feel again. The old walls are down, and now new pathways are just starting to form. And that leaves us with this final thought to chew on. What if that inner emptiness isn't a flaw at all? What if it's just space? Space to finally feel again? Maybe it isn't an absence we need to rush to fill, but an opening, an invitation to just slowly and without any force finally begin to feel.